Hey guys, we are on page 173 in our language books. We're really just doing the same thing that we did in the last video. We're still dealing with glossaries. And glossary, again, usually, almost always, is in the back of your book, and it will go over maybe unfamiliar terms or unfamiliar words, or maybe just important words. Maybe you already know what it means. Kind of like yesterday, I was looking in our Bible book. Maybe you already knew what some of those words were, like fool or counsel that I pulled up in our Bible book yesterday. But they're still important words that we went over in our book. And again, some of these words that we went over in our glossary, like maybe the word fact that we went over yesterday, in yesterday's lesson on the other page, maybe you already know what a fact is. Maybe you knew what a fact is before you even came into third grade, but it was still an important word that we went over in our language book this year, so it was in our glossary. So, think A says use the glossary in the back of the book to answer the questions. So just like we did yesterday, we're using this glossary at the back of our book that tells us the important words, or maybe some words that we were not familiar with. So we have number one, find the word adjective in the glossary. Write 3 words that are always adjectives. Now, you might remember, there are 3 words that I said are always going to be adjectives, no matter what. And those words were articles. Now, it's not the word article, but that's what they're also called. And if you look back at the glossary, adjective should be at the beginning of the glossary since it starts with A. And there's actually a lot underneath adjective. And it says, it gives the 3 words, and it says blank, blank, and blank are always adjectives. And I'm not going to read those words out loud because you need to go back in your glossary and look. But make sure you write those 3 words down. Number 2, find diagramming sentences. We know how to diagram sentences. So let's go back in our glossary. Diagramming starts with D, so it should still be at least fairly close to the beginning. And here's diagramming sentences. And it says, what is the first step of diagramming a sentence? So if you go back to diagramming sentences, it actually is on 2 different pages. But the first step is going to be, of course, towards the beginning of the diagramming sentences. It says, follow these steps in diagramming subjects and verbs. So, of course, diagramming subjects and verbs is partially the first step. But the first thing we do before we diagram anything else is we do, and it says number 1, and it tells us what the first step is. So I'm not going to read what it is, again, because you need to look in your glossary on your own and see what is the first step. Make sure you write the full sentence. Don't try to skimp on only writing half of it or anything. Write the full thing. It's a complete sentence. Make sure you capitalize the first word and put a period at the end of the sentence. Number 3, find the word antonym in the glossary. Now, here's an interesting thing. Antonym. We have not gone over antonyms yet in language class. We'll go over them later, but we haven't really mentioned them in the book yet. But you should already know what an antonym is. What is an antonym? Right, an antonym is just the opposite. It's just another word for the opposite of something. And we know what opposites are. We definitely should know what opposites are. So if I go, antonym starts with an A, so it should be at the beginning of my glossary. And I found antonym. It says antonyms are words that have opposite meanings. And again, we haven't really gone over them yet, but we should know what they are. And it says write 2 sets of antonyms that are given as examples. Now this one tells you write the ones that are given as examples. So that means the ones that they have there, they want you to copy them down. Now, they give you 3 examples of antonyms, and you see how it gives you a blank and then a line and then a blank. If you look over in the example, right here, Like the first one, for example, says hot, and then there's a line, and then it says cold. And you could use that one, or you could use maybe the other two examples, but you would be writing hot, you would just leave that line there, and then you'd write cold right there. So that's kind of how you would be doing that. And then number 4, use the glossary to find the word synonym and finish the definition. Again, we haven't really gone over synonym, but a synonym is kind of the opposite, ironically, of an antonym. But synonym starts with an S. That's more towards like the middle or the end of the alphabet. So it should be towards the end in S, and there's the word synonym. Now, I'm not going to read what the definition of synonym is. And again, we haven't really gone over synonym in the book. But it does say, for number 4, synonyms are words that have the same blank or blank the same blank. And right here, it says synonyms are words that have the same blank. I'm not going to say what the word is, but if you look back in your glossary, you'll see it. So it says synonyms are words that have the same blank or blank the same blank. So if you go back in your glossary, you'll find those, and it should be fairly simple to fill in the blanks for those. And then remember B, we're marking up these sentences. So we're drawing a line between my subject and predicate. We're underlining the verb twice and the subject once. We're circling our adverbs and drawing an arrow to the verb that it describes. So I'll do number 1 with you, and then I want you to do number 3 and 5 on your own for this page. So my sentence for number 1, Mr. Walker told John a Bible story. That's my first sentence, and again, you have to do 3 and 5 when I'm finished with this one. But right now, let's separate our subject and predicate first. So where do I separate my subject and predicate? Right. I will separate it right here between Mr. Walker and told. And now we need to find the verb. So where is my verb in this sentence? It's going to be an action. Which word is an action? Something you can do. Right? Told is definitely something you can do. So underline the word told 2 times. Make sure it's underlined twice. And now I need to ask my question, who or what told? Well, in this sentence, who told? Mr. Walker told, because Mr. Walker is the one that is doing the telling in this sentence. So underline Mr. Walker 1 time, and make sure you're underlining Mr. and Walker. It's one person. And now I have Mr. Walker told, and I need to see if there's any adverbs in here. Are there any? Remember my adverb questions? It's how, when, where, how often, to what extent. Those are my 5 adverb questions that you really should be familiar with. How, when, where, how often, to what extent. So I have told how. There's not any words in here telling me how Mr. Walker is telling this Bible story. When, it's not telling me when. How often, it's not telling me how often. And those are really the only 3 that we've really mentioned in the book. So I don't think there's going to be any adverbs in this sentence. But you may come across adverbs in number 3 or number 5. Make sure you're using your adverb questions. How, when, where, how often, to what extent are my 5. Make sure you're focusing mainly on how, when, and how often. Make sure those 3 are the ones that you're mainly focusing on, because those are the ones that you're most likely going to be using if you find any adverbs.